Brooke and Nick Hogan just made a shocking announcement. They won't attend their father Hulk Hogan's funeral. In this emotional expose, we dive deep into the heartbreaking truth behind their decision and what it reveals about the Hogan family's decades-long struggles. From their days in the spotlight on Hogan Knows Best to the scandals, betrayals, and estrangement that followed, this story is more than just celebrity drama. It's a raw, powerful look at grief, legacy, and the pain that fame can leave behind. Hulk Hogan, the immortal icon, the American hero in red and yellow who made the world believe in larger-than-life dreams. For over 4 decades, Terry Bollea, known to millions as Hulk Hogan, was the face of professional wrestling, a symbol of power, resilience, and charisma. But today, as tributes pour in from fans, wrestlers, and celebrities across the globe, there's a silence that cuts deeper than any headline. A silence not in the arenas or the streets, but within his own family. Because moments after the world learned of Hulk Hogan's passing from sudden cardiac arrest, a shocking announcement surfaced. One that blindsided even his closest allies in the WWE. Brooke and Nick Hogan, his only children, have publicly declared that they will not be attending their father's funeral. The media erupted, fans were stunned, and behind the scenes, a family already fractured was now fully exposed. This isn't just a story about absence at a funeral. It's a story about heartbreak, about betrayal, about the painful scars left behind when fame and dysfunction go hand in hand. And to truly understand what led Brooke and Nick to this moment, we must go all the way back to the beginning. Not the start of Hulkamania, but the start of the Hogan family. Before the cameras, before the scandals, before the grief. In the early 1990s, Hulk Hogan was untouchable. He was the superhero kids wanted to grow up to be, the titan of the wrestling world whose "say your prayers and eat your vitamins" mantra shaped a generation. But at home, Terry Bollea was a husband to Linda Claridge and a father to 2 young children, Brooke and Nick. The public saw the smiles, the matching bandanas, the picture-perfect American family. What they didn't see was the pressure. The pressure of keeping up appearances. The constant travel. The growing distance between Terry the performer and Terry the father. By the early 2000s, Hogan was slowing down in the ring, but a new spotlight emerged: reality television. In 2005, the world was introduced to Hogan Knows Best, a VH1 reality show that promised a glimpse into the real life of wrestling's most beloved figure. The series portrayed Hulk as the overprotective, well-meaning dad navigating fame, family, and teenage drama. But behind the scenes, that show was far from wholesome. Producers have since admitted the reality was tightly controlled, with the Hogan image micromanaged and staged interactions designed to uphold the illusion of unity. Still, for Brooke and Nick, those years were confusing. One minute they were private citizens, the next they were reality TV stars. Every fight, every misstep, every awkward teenage moment broadcast to millions. And while Hogan Knows Best made the Hogan family famous again, it also accelerated their unraveling. The attention brought friction. The scripted drama became real. And behind the scenes, cracks deepened. In 2007, that facade came crashing down. A tragic car accident involving Nick Hogan, then only 17 years old, changed everything. Nick was behind the wheel, driving recklessly in Clearwater, Florida, with his best friend John Graziano in the passenger seat. The car lost control and slammed into a tree. Graziano, a decorated Iraq War veteran, was left with permanent brain damage. Nick was charged with reckless driving and served jail time. But the real damage was done at home. The accident not only wrecked lives, it shattered the Hogan family's already fragile dynamic. Publicly, the Hogans were bombarded with lawsuits, media attacks, and online hatred. But internally, a deeper resentment began to brew. Nick blamed his parents for enabling his behavior. Brooke grew distant, unable to process the gravity of what had happened while surrounded by chaos. And Linda? She quietly filed for divorce. Suddenly, the Hogan family, once hailed as America's muscle-bound sweethearts, were splashed across tabloids with a very different reputation. The divorce was bitter. Allegations of infidelity, verbal abuse, and financial manipulation flew in every direction. Brooke found herself caught in the middle, torn between a mother she didn't trust and a father she couldn't understand. Nick, meanwhile, was spiraling. The accident haunted him. The media mocked him. And his relationship with his father soured into a tense, distant acknowledgement rather than any form of healing. And then came the tapes. The infamous leaked audio of Hulk Hogan in 2012, in which he was heard using racist slurs during a conversation that rocked the WWE universe. Sponsors dropped him. WWE erased him from its Hall of Fame. And for the first time ever, the legend was truly fallen. But for Brooke and Nick, it wasn't just a PR scandal. It was a personal reckoning. According to those close to the family, both children were devastated, not just because of what their father said, but because they had already known this side of him. Brooke, in a now-deleted blog post, alluded to things the public doesn't even know yet. Nick, more cryptically, began distancing himself entirely from the Hogan name. While Hulk issued a public apology, reconciled with WWE, and eventually regained some favor, the relationship with his children never fully recovered. In the years that followed, public appearances of the three together became increasingly rare. Brooke moved into music and quietly settled into life away from Hollywood. Nick stayed under the radar, occasionally appearing at events, but noticeably silent on family matters. And Hogan? He continued to wrestle in sporadic appearances, give interviews, and maintain his larger-than-life image, one that many believe came at the cost of real intimacy with those closest to him. So, when news of Hulk Hogan's death broke, many expected Brooke and Nick to be by his side, or at the very least, at the front row of his funeral. But insiders now confirm that the siblings hadn't spoken to their father in nearly 2 years. One WWE insider, who asked not to be named, said, "This was coming. The kids had distanced themselves a long time ago. They were tired of being part of the circus." Sources close to the family suggest that the decision not to attend the funeral wasn't made lightly. It was the result of years, decades, of unresolved trauma. Brooke and Nick reportedly told close friends that attending would have felt dishonest, forced, and in service of an image that no longer reflects who they are. In a somber social media post, Brooke wrote, "My heart is heavy. Grief is complicated when love and pain walk hand in hand. I pray my father rests in peace, but my healing has taken a different path." Nick, on the other hand, kept things briefer, posting a black square with no caption. When reached by reporters, he declined to comment. Wrestlers like Ric Flair, John Cena, and Kurt Angle have expressed sorrow over the family divide. Flair, in an emotional tribute, said, "Hulk was a brother to me. I know how much he loved his kids. I just wish things had ended differently between them." Others, however, have pointed to the very public chaos that followed the Hogan name for years, arguing that it's no surprise the kids walked away when they did. Behind closed doors, the funeral is moving forward quietly, without its most crucial family members. Linda Hogan is expected to attend, though sources say she has no communication with Brooke or Nick either. The funeral will feature a private ceremony for close friends and select members of the wrestling community. WWE, who had remained silent during Hogan's most controversial years, is now planning a posthumous tribute at the next major pay-per-view. But as the world mourns Hulk Hogan, the absence of Brooke and Nick speaks louder than any eulogy. Their silence isn't just a rejection of a man, it's a rejection of the myth, of the narrative, of the decades of expectations placed on them to smile for the cameras while holding in their grief. And as fans grapple with the loss of a wrestling legend, this story forces us to ask a deeper question. What happens when fame that promises glory and connection, becomes the very force that breaks a family apart? Can a man be beloved by millions but estranged from his own blood? And what does that say about the industry, the media, and the culture that built him up? For Brooke and Nick, this moment isn't just about grief, it's about reclaiming their truth. A truth that doesn't live in highlight reels or viral promos. A truth that lives in late-night phone calls that never came. Birthdays forgotten. Regrets never apologized for. Trauma never addressed. They don't need to wear black in a pew to prove they're hurting. They've been mourning their father for years, long before his heart gave out, and in a world that taught them to play characters before they were old enough to define themselves, maybe stepping away from the spotlight one final time is their way of healing. Maybe, just maybe. Not showing up is the most honest thing they've ever done. In the aftermath of Brooke and Nick Hogan's decision to abstain from attending their father's funeral, the wrestling world finds itself divided. Not just in opinion, but in emotion. On one side are those who grew up idolizing Hulk Hogan, who see this as a moment of reverence, a time to honor the man who helped define an entire era of entertainment. On the other side are those who understand that legacies are more than championship belts and catchphrases. They're built in the quiet moments, the hard conversations, the unglamorous responsibilities of being present when no camera is rolling. As news networks roll tributes and fans post their favorite Hulk Hogan memories, the glaring omission of his children at the service has turned into more than a family decision. It's become a cultural conversation. Can you truly separate the legend from the man? Should children be expected to forgive public icons for private wounds? And how do we, as a society, mourn someone who meant everything to us, but not everything to their own family? These are not questions with simple answers. But they're questions worth asking. Because the truth is, Hulk Hogan was never just Hulk Hogan. He was Terry Bollea, a man who, like anyone else, was flawed, afraid, ambitious, loving, selfish, and deeply human. And for Brooke and Nick, those two identities, the man and the myth, were never neatly separated. One bled into the other. When the world applauded Hulk for his heroic comebacks and show-stealing promos, it often forgot the strain those performances placed on the people in his orbit. When he delivered his larger-than-life charisma to arenas filled with 90,000 screaming fans, he sometimes failed to deliver that same energy to birthday parties, family dinners, or difficult conversations. In her own words, Brooke once said in a rare 2018 podcast interview, "People forget that he wasn't just Hulk to the world. He was Hulk at home. It was always a performance. It was hard to know when it was real." That blurred line between persona and parent may be the key to understanding this heartbreaking decision. Those who knew Terry Bollea intimately describe him as a man constantly trapped between the roles he played: hero, businessman, husband, father, and the man he really was beneath the surface. Former WWE executive Bruce Pritchard, in a recent interview, reflected, "Terry gave everything to the business. Sometimes too much. And it came at a cost." That's the part fans never saw. Even close friends noticed the shift in Hogan during the final years of his life. He had grown more reclusive, more nostalgic, and, at times, more sorrowful. One unnamed former wrestler who remained close to him recalled a quiet conversation just months before his passing. "He told me, 'I don't know if my kids even know who I really am anymore.' That broke me." And perhaps that's the tragedy buried underneath all the headlines, the realization that, in the pursuit of greatness, Terry Bollea lost connection with the very people he loved most. Not out of malice. Not out of cruelty. But out of a tragic misunderstanding of what legacy really means. For years, Hogan believed legacy was the roar of the crowd, the championship around his waist, the posters on bedroom walls. But for Brooke and Nick, legacy was something else. It was being there, listening, apologizing, growing, and by the time Terry was ready to offer that, perhaps it was too late. Public reconciliation between the Hogan children and their father never occurred. Not on television. Not on social media. Not at family events. There were rumors in recent years that Brooke was open to healing, but insiders now say the talks never gained traction. Trust, it seems, had eroded beyond repair. The hurt went too deep. In the week following Hogan's death, tributes came in from across the globe. The Rock posted a heartfelt message. John Cena shared a black-and-white photo of the two backstage. Even Vince McMahon, in a rare public statement, called Hogan one of the most significant figures to ever grace the ring. But when asked about the family dynamic, many either dodged the question or spoke in carefully chosen words. WWE issued a statement acknowledging the deeply personal and complex relationship between Terry and his family, offering condolences, but refraining from addressing the funeral controversy directly. Meanwhile, public opinion has been sharply divided. Comment sections and social media threads are flooded with debates. Some fans accuse Brooke and Nick of being ungrateful, heartless, or attention-seeking. Others defend them, arguing that no child should be expected to perform grief for the public, especially when the wounds of the past remain untreated. Mental health experts have also weighed in. Dr. Elaine Turner, a grief counselor and family trauma specialist, offered this perspective in a televised interview. Grief is not always about showing up to a funeral. Sometimes grief is choosing peace. Sometimes it's choosing to protect yourself from a room full of expectations that don't match your truth. The Hogan children, it seems, have done just that, and while many fans may never fully understand their decision, it's important to recognize that their absence is not a lack of love, it is a form of survival. They're not walking away from their father. They are walking away from the pain that came with trying to reconcile who the world said he was with who they experienced him to be. In many ways, their decision is the final chapter in a story that has always been more complicated than it appeared. The story of a family thrust into fame before they could prepare for its consequences. Of children raised on stage lights and storylines instead of privacy and peace. Of a father who tried to give the world everything, and in doing so, gave his children a version of himself they never asked for. In the years to come, this decision will likely be revisited again and again. By fans, by journalists, by family members themselves. Some will continue to judge. Others will grow to understand. But for now, Brooke and Nick have spoken through silence. And in that silence, there is a message louder than any eulogy. As the final bell tolls for Hulk Hogan, as the wrestling community bows its head and salutes a legend, a different kind of grief plays out behind the scenes. A grief not televised, not dramatized, but real, raw, and painfully human. And for anyone who has ever had a complicated relationship with a parent, who has ever carried the weight of legacy on fragile shoulders, who has ever had to say goodbye without closure, Brooke and Nick's choice may not just be understandable. It may be brave. But even amid the silence, the world keeps asking, could it have ended differently? Could there have been one final embrace? One moment where Terry Bollea, not Hulk Hogan, sat down with his children. Not to apologize for every mistake, not to rewrite the past, but simply to acknowledge it. To say, I did my best, but I know it wasn't always good enough. And I'm sorry. We'll never know. The funeral went on without them. A somber, private affair held under the Florida sun. WWE sent representatives. Former wrestlers, some close friends, some former rivals, stood in attendance, dressed in black, but wrapped in memories that still shimmered with technicolor. The eulogies spoke of Hulk Hogan, the legend. The man who slammed Andre the Giant. The man who made WrestleMania a phenomenon. The man who carried an industry on his back and made millions believe that good always triumphs over evil, but no one spoke of Terry the father. No one mentioned the years his children weren't speaking to him. No one dared pierce the mythology with reality, because to many in that room, Hulk Hogan wasn't just a man. He was a monument. And you don't mourn a monument by telling the truth. You mourn it by protecting the illusion, yet outside those closed doors, the truth echoed louder than any 10-bell salute. Brooke stayed home. Her social media quiet. Nick remained unseen. The only tribute he made was personal, a photo posted to his private circle showing himself as a boy on his father's shoulders. No caption. Just a memory, frozen in time, from before everything broke. Wrestling insiders say the rift between father and children had widened considerably in the last few years. Sources close to the family revealed that Terry made several attempts to reconnect, birthday calls, short handwritten letters, even a Christmas gift mailed anonymously in 2022. But the efforts, while perhaps sincere, were too little, too late. The hurt had calcified. The therapist who once worked with Brooke during the Hogan Knows Best era gave a rare anonymous quote for this exposé. The pressure on that family was immense. Everyone had to play a role. Everyone had to smile on cue. But behind the scenes? There was real pain. Brooke always carried the weight of being her father's emotional support, and no one carried hers. And Nick? The car accident changed him forever. While the public focused on his jail time and the damage done to his friend, few ever explored how a teenage boy, thrust into infamy and blame, internalized his guilt. And how that guilt, unaddressed and untreated, transformed into resentment towards himself and towards his father. He once told a friend, it was always about him, his career, his comeback, his legacy. No one ever stopped to ask what that crash did to me. So when the time came to say goodbye, Nick and Brooke chose not to say it in public. Not because they didn't feel loss, but because they had already said goodbye in pieces long before their father's heart stopped beating. WWE's posthumous tribute aired the following week. A lavish video package narrated by Vince McMahon, intercut with teary-eyed testimonials from legends past and present. John Cena called him the foundation we all built on. Roman Reigns said, without Hulk Hogan, none of us would be here. Even The Undertaker, rarely emotional in public, uttered the words, rest easy, brother. But noticeably missing from the tribute? Any mention of Brooke or Nick. No quotes. No photos. No archived footage of them with their father. WWE, it seemed, had made the decision to let sleeping wounds lie, yet the public wouldn't. Online, the backlash was immediate and cruel. Commenters flooded Brooke's Instagram, demanding explanations. Some called her heartless. Others accused her of riding her father's fame only to abandon him. But amid the noise, a quieter group rose to her defense, those who understood what it meant to live through parental dysfunction. Survivors of emotional neglect. Children of narcissists. Adults who carried childhood wounds into their own therapy sessions, and they said the thing that most others missed: grief is not a performance. For decades, the Hogan family was a performance. A carefully curated brand, sold to audiences in ring gear and confessional soundbites. When Hogan Knows Best aired, it was pitched as the antidote to chaos, a famous man choosing family over fame. But it was a lie. Not entirely. But enough to cause harm, because no one told Brooke and Nick that playing a happy family for millions of strangers doesn't fix what's broken in private. That smiling through dysfunction doesn't make it disappear, and so they learned the hard way. In front of cameras. In tabloid spreads. In courtroom transcripts. In choosing not to attend their father's funeral, Brooke and Nick Hogan didn't just walk away from a ceremony. They walked away from a cycle. From expectations. From an industry that asked them to be props in a story that wasn't theirs to begin with. The final image the public may hold of Hulk Hogan is a flag-draped casket, a tearful Vince McMahon, a ring filled with candles and silence. But for Brooke and Nick, the final image may be something else entirely. A voicemail unheard. A letter unopened. A childhood lived in a shadow so large it blocked the sun, and maybe that's what hurts the most. That in the end, love was there, buried under layers of hurt, misunderstanding, silence, but it never had the space to be spoken plainly, to be held. There are those who say Brooke and Nick will regret this choice one day. That funerals are not for the dead, but for the living. And maybe they will. Or maybe they won't. Maybe what they regret is the years spent trying to heal wounds while still being wounded. Or maybe they've already grieved more than anyone realizes, because grief is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like a decision that confuses everyone else, but finally makes sense to you. Sometimes it looks like staying home when the world expects you to show up, and sometimes it looks like walking away. This is not the end of Hulk Hogan's story. His legacy will live on in wrestling history, in merchandise, in tribute videos and documentaries. But for his children, the story is far more personal, far more painful, and far from over, because legacy isn't just what you leave the world, it's what you leave behind in the hearts of those who knew you best. And for Brooke and Nick, that legacy is still being written. Not in headlines, not in tribute reels, but in therapy rooms, in conversations with their own children, in quiet moments where they decide what parts of their past to carry forward and what to finally let go. Rest in peace, Hulk Hogan. But for your children, the healing has only just begun. In the weeks following Hulk Hogan's funeral, the media frenzy has begun to fade. The headlines have moved on. WWE continues with its next chapter. New champions are crowned, new storylines unfold. But behind the spotlight, in the quiet shadows left by one of wrestling's most iconic figures, a more profound conversation lingers, one that transcends the squared circle, because this story was never just about a celebrity death. It was never just about wrestling, scandal, or children skipping a funeral. It was about something deeper, something universal. The tension between image and intimacy, between fame and family, between the legacy we build for the world and the relationships we leave behind at home. Hulk Hogan, the larger-than-life persona, was a creation, a fantasy, a beacon of strength and perseverance wrapped in a bandana and fueled by adrenaline and showmanship. But Terry Bollea, the man behind the mask, was human. He stumbled. He hurt others. He sought redemption, but sometimes fell short. And in doing so, he became a mirror for so many families fractured by the weight of expectations and the silence of unspoken pain. For Brooke and Nick, their decision not to attend their father's funeral will be debated for years. It will live in YouTube comment sections, podcast speculation, and social media theories. But the truth is, the only people who truly understand that decision are Brooke and Nick themselves. Their absence was not a spectacle, it was an act of quiet reclamation. Of choosing truth over performance, of stepping away from a story they didn't write. In the end, that may be the most courageous thing they've ever done. Because in the world of fame, where everything is content and every emotion is monetized, it takes a rare kind of strength to say, I choose peace over appearance, to choose healing over heritage, to stop trying to prove anything to the world and start proving something to yourself. And while fans may struggle to understand that choice, it's important we shift the lens. Instead of asking why Brooke and Nick weren't there for their father, perhaps we should ask a different question. Was their father truly there for them? Because funerals are about presence, yes, but presence begins in life, not death. It begins in how you show up when no one is watching, in how you love when there's nothing to gain. In the calls you return, the apologies you make, the quiet moments you don't forget. Terry Bollea, for all his fame and power, may have won the world, but he lost something sacred in the process. And maybe that is the true tragedy of this tale, not that Brooke and Nick missed his funeral, but that their pain was never fully seen, that their silence had to scream what words could never say, that when it came time to say goodbye, there was nothing left to say at all. And yet, in that silence, a new legacy begins, not one built on cheers, but on truth. Perhaps this story will inspire others in similar situations to rethink what legacy really means. To understand that being a legend to millions means little if you're a stranger to your own blood. That we must invest as much in our homes as we do in our dreams. That no amount of fame can replace a father's presence or heal a child's unseen wounds. Maybe, just maybe, the final chapter of Hulk Hogan's story is not in the ring, but in what happens next for his children. In the path they now walk, away from the glare of his spotlight and into their own truth. For them, the future holds no title belts or championship runs. But it holds something far more valuable: freedom. Freedom to speak their truth. Freedom to break cycles. Freedom to live not as the children of a myth, but as the authors of their own story. And as the world moves on from the death of a legend, Brooke and Nick move forward into something else entirely, the life beyond legacy. And in doing so, they remind us all, sometimes, the bravest goodbyes are the ones said in silence.